Welcome everyone to the November 2023 IEF webinar. I'm Kayla Baskett, your host, and today we are going to have some field reports from around the Americas. We have some Colombia, so we're going to start with Pascal. Pascal's been working in Colombia on Fundac and environmental projects for a long time. And right when the Universal House of Justice started encouraging junior youth activities around the globe, which was the early aughts, Pascal's team started hosting environment activities for junior youth. So Pascal will present for 15-20 minutes or so, and then we'll have a discussion. We'll open up the floor to the group to ask him questions, talk about things similar that you've been doing in your community to what he's talking about. When we're done talking about Colombia, we'll move to Ottawa, Canada, and do a second field report. So Pascal, take the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I'll share my presentation here. Okay. Right, okay, so this is an experience that was started in the 1990s under the aegis of the Ruhi Institute in response to the Universal House of Message encouraging the communities to do activities in the field of the environment, and linking that with the growing junior youth movement. So I call this a learning experience, and I'm basically going to talk about what inspired us to do what we did, the objectives of these camps, the methods, and a very brief history. Okay, so here's a picture, for example, to give you a little bit of context. That's a typical camp in the Cauca region of Colombia, which is in the southwest of Colombia. It's a very mountainous area with a lot of forests, of course, a river nearby, and that's a typical camp. Okay. So in terms of the inspiration, well, it basically came from the compilation on the conservation of natural resources published by the Universal House of Justice in October 1989. Okay, ecological camps was first, we are convinced, we see this, that nature is a reflection of the divine. And we see it also in terms of when we look at the writings of the faith, that they are full of metaphors taken from nature, right? The writings of both Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha have a plethora of metaphors that are taken from nature to explain spiritual principles. Of course, that goes with the other principle that there is a book of Revelation and a book of creation, and that they complement each other. And if we want to understand the book of Revelation, we have to understand and be able to read the book of creation. The example of the metaphors is a perfect one, right? So the reason Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha choose metaphors from nature to explain complex spiritual principles is because we live in this natural world. We see what's happening around us, and so we can understand these very complex spiritual principles by understanding these metaphors that are taken from nature. Then, of course, there's the principle that there is a spiritual and a material dimension to life, and that they are interdependent, one with the other. There is the principle that there is a relationship between service and social transformation. So if we can encourage our junior youth to develop a life of service to others, to the communities in which they live, they will contribute both to their own personal transformation and to the transformation of the communities in which they live and their families. And then finally, there's the principle of that the junior youth go through a critical phase in their lives when they have that age between like 12 and 16, and that for themselves, for their lives, and because they also have certain characteristics that make them extremely important within the life of a community. So these are the basic principles that inspired the working group that worked with these ecological camps. The objectives that we defined were basically five big objectives. The first one is to promote spiritual values that are essential in the formation of youth with social responsibility. And here I mention a few. The second big objective, grand objective, is to ensure the participation of junior youth in the development of the collective potentialities of society. And again, we mentioned a few here. No? The third objective is to foment the formation and strengthening of junior youth groups. So we hoped that the camps would actually encourage junior youth to participate, to want to contribute to this growing movement, you know, in the communities of junior youth. Of course, the fourth is extremely important also, is to develop an ecological conscience in the participants, a conscience that is based on both spiritual and scientific principles, to help them understand why we need to care for, protect, conserve, love the world of creation, and the scientific principles that help us to understand why this is so important for our own long-term survival. And then finally is to provide the scientific knowledge that they need to carry out these ecological service actions in their community. So each camp has 2 or 3 concrete service actions that they will then have to carry out in their communities. And so we have to provide the scientific knowledge that they need to be able to do that. In terms of the methods, well, each camp was developed around, the content was developed for 4 days, 3 nights. Each camp had one overarching theme, a general, big general theme, and each day of the camp, a sub-theme, okay, related obviously to the overarching theme. The basic components, for example, for each day was first a study of the relevant excerpts taken from the sacred writings of the faith, then a study of the scientific concepts related to that sub-theme for the day. Then they had to carry out some camp-related service action. Of course, these camps are in a very natural environment, and so there's all kinds of activities related to the camp itself that need to be carried out. And they also practice the specific service action of that day, you know, which has to do with the activity that they will then carry out in their communities. Then at the end of the afternoon, there's the use of the arts. Okay, we have always an artistic activity. There's several recreational activities during the day, and there's also a nighttime activity around a bonfire. Basically, in each camp, we had an average of 60 to 80 junior youth participating. Sometimes even more than that, but basically that was like the good number that we wanted and hoped for. The junior youth were divided into small groups of 4 to 5. Each group had an animator, an older youth who was the animator for that group and shared the tent. So each group and their animator had a tent. They each selected a spiritual quality that they strived to develop during the camp, and that was the name of the group. So, for example, there was a group that was the truthful group, there was another group that was the honesty group, there was another group that was the service group, and so on and so forth. And each group was given a specific service action to carry out every day for the good development of the camp. This is an example, for example, of one of these older youth as serving as the animator with several of her, there's three of her junior youth studying together. This is another picture of where they're waiting for lunch, basically, around basically waiting for the lunch to be ready. You know, they've finished the morning activities. You can see I'm here. No, I'm right here on the side of the picture. Of course, many years ago, but that's where I am in that picture. There's another animator with her junior youth, again getting ready for the next activity. Okay, just as a matter of an example, I wanted to mention the first camp. There are 4 camps that have been completely developed and tested with many groups, right? And so the contents are basically, that's what we believe are the contents will not change. So the first camp, the overarching theme is appreciation for nature, and each day has a sub-theme. For example, day 1 is nature as a reflection of the divine. Number 2 is a unified system, and day 3, unity and diversity. And there are, of course, 2 half days to settle in at the camp, to put up the tents, to organize the space, to prepare the service activities, and so on and so forth. And a half day also to pack up at the end of the camp, you know, and try and leave the place as clean as possible. For example, on day 1 of this camp, you know, camp 1, again, as an example, no, just as an example, that was the typical activities carried out for a normal day, you know, of the camp. No? And so you have dawn prayers, of course. We start with dawn prayers. We have sports. We found that it's very important to have a good physical activity right early in the morning to get them tired, because, you know, junior youth are full of energy. And so you want them to, you know, slow down a bit and calm down. And so you need a strong physical activity in the morning. Then after the breakfast, we have the memorizing of some sacred writings that have to do with the topic of the day. You know? Then there's some time to study some relevant excerpts from the sacred writings with the Ruhi Institute method, you know, with quotes and questions and discussion and so on and so forth. Then there are group games. Always there's a group activity that illustrates the concept of the day. In this case, the game was the web of life, where we have a long string and they form a circle, and each junior youth is one element of a habitat. So he can be an animal, he can be an insect, he can be a flower, he can be the water, he can be the air, he can be the soil, and so on. And they weave the web of life. They say what is the relationship between each one as they throw the string and start weaving a very complex web of life. And then someone comes along and says, "Oh, I want to cut down all the trees." And so whoever is a tree lets loose of the string. "Oh, I want to kill a few animals. You'll go hunting." What happens? Or I want to throw some waste into the river. What happens? And you can see that slowly the web of life, which is extraordinarily complex and subtle and so on, starts breaking down, you know, as more and more of these elements start failing. And that's an illustration of a very simple illustration of what's happening in many environments in Colombia and around the world. Then the service activity in this case was how to establish and manage a compost to encourage people to separate the organic from the inorganic waste and give a proper management to the organic wastes. No? Then there's an ecological outing to explore around where the camp is. At the end of the day, there's the artistic activity. In this case, we had Blessed is the Spot, where they have memorized that prayer. And for each element mentioned, there's a space which they have to draw. So they do the drawing. So they have a big paper element, and they draw in the missing element. Then there's a night walk, very important, the night walk, because we want them to become aware of the symphony of sounds that are in nature, and most often we're not aware at all of the incredible complexity and subtlety of the different sounds that characterize specific ecosystem and environment. No? And so there's a time of reflection during the walk. There's a time of absolute silence, for 2 minutes. We just stand there, and everyone just tries to identify and listen to all the possible sounds that they can listen to. Right? And then when the walk ends with the bonfire, which animators have prepared beforehand, so it's there when they arrive, and then they share what sounds they were able to hear. And there's also someone that has prepared a story from the history of our faith and shares that story. And of course, there's always something to eat, right? to end the day, happily, as we say. So a little bit of history. In the early 1990s, that's when, after that compilation on natural resources was published, a Ecological Junior Youth Camp Commission was named and started developing the contents and the activities of these 4-day camps. We were very lucky that someone made a very generous donation, and we were able to purchase 15 tents and camp implements, which include, shovels and picks and all kinds of implements that are needed for the camp itself. However, we did have one big limitation, which I mentioned there. We did not have a fixed site for the camp, right? We did not have a fixed site. And so we had to, for each camp, we had to find and organize beforehand a special site, especially the latrines. And a river close by was essential because obviously you need water. You can't survive without water. But that became a limitation, and I'll mention it later. But over a 10-year period, we were able to offer approximately 15 camps in Colombia. 2 of those not in the Cauca region. Of course, most of them were in the Cauca region, which is where the Ruhi Institute, the main building, is located. But we were able to offer one in the center of the country, close to the capital in Bogota, and one in the northeast of Colombia. Altogether, some 800 junior youth participated, and we trained 130 animators during that time. We were also very lucky that the Continental Board of Councillors financed and asked us to provide training to youth in Ireland and Australia. And I was the lucky one to be able to do that. It was an amazing experience in both cases, just really, really amazing, just beautiful to be able to do that. The contents of 4 camps were fully developed and tested. Each of these 4 camps was offered several times. And of course, every time we offered it, we had an evaluation to see how should we modify it, how should we change it, both the contents and the methods and so on and so forth, the times, the activities. And we constantly tried to polish the camps. We also have 2 other camps that are partially developed, that haven't been tested with a group of junior youth. But we do have the quotes and we do have the sub-themes identified, but haven't been able to put it into practice, the 2 other camps. We also developed a logistical guide to help those that want to organize a camp, where we have the time schedule, the suggested time schedule, the functions of the camp coordinator. There has to be one camp coordinator, and the group animators, right? They have specific responsibilities. We have the food, we have a suggested menu that can be prepared. We have obviously the need for a first aid kit, what it should contain. What does the site need to have, right, for these camps? What is required? And also a small manual on how to set up the tents, how to, put up the tents, because of course, most of our participants never have had the chance to put up a tent. They wouldn't know how to start, where to go about it. And then we also have the importance of tent maintenance, no? After the camp, no? You have to clean the tents very carefully and dry them and maintain them and keep them, because otherwise they get damaged very, very quickly, no? And of course, in case there's a tear, you have to repair it. And there's all kinds of logistical aspects to the camp that require a lot of work. So as I mentioned, sadly enough, we were not able to continue because the main limitation, again, is we did not have a fixed site, which would have helped enormously. And it was just logistically very, very difficult to organize a new site every single time. And of course, the tents themselves, as I mentioned, need very careful maintenance, and they started wearing and tearing. And again, we did not have the funds to replace them. And so basically, we weren't able to continue, no? But we feel it was a very, very rich, very good experience. The junior youth who participated mentioned that these camps, and now they're much older, and they mentioned these camps had a transformative impact in their lives, because for many of these junior youth, it was the first time away from their parents. It was the first time in a natural environment. It was the first time where they had, to learn to serve others and to be part of a collective group where you take decisions together, right? You consult and take decisions together. And so it really helped to develop their identity as junior youth, as Baha'i junior youth. No? So we are convinced that there's an enormous potential for these camps. And hopefully at some point in the future, we will be able to continue working on them. That's the hope that we have. But we'll see what happens. So that's all I have for today.
Pascal, you mentioned that the camps were under this Ecological Junior Youth Camp Commission. Who created
that? Basically, the Ruhui Institute in Colombia.
Oh, yes. Cool.
Yes, so we worked with the counselor, right? With the counselor and the Ruhui Institute.
Wow. So you mentioned 4 camps plus 2 more that were untested. Is that 6 different curriculums basically? Like
yes. So again, each camp has their overarching theme, and there are 3 days, right? So each day has a sub-theme that's related to that overarching theme.
The animators, were they the animators who were already working with these particular junior youth, or were they unique to the camp?
They were unique to the camp. They had their own groups. No? They had their own groups, of course. They had experience working with junior youth, but not necessarily their junior youth went to that camp. No.
So the kids got to get mixed up and meet new
exactly. Yes. The whole purpose of the camp was to get to know junior youth from other communities. No. And so even though they came as a group, they did not function as a group during the camp. No? We split them out. Of course, the tents, you had to put boys and girls separately, no? So that was part of the splitting up.
Yeah. Pascal, was this ever replicated anywhere else? You mentioned that there was training conducted in some other countries.
Yes, well, there was training done in Ireland and Australia. But sadly enough, I don't know if they actually put that training into practice. In the case of Ireland, we did the training and we did a camp, which was really nice. That's what they wanted. No? They wanted me to help them do their first camp, no? And it was beautiful. It was really well done. But they had a fixed site. They rented out a site. No? They rented out a site, not with tents, but with small houses. And it was very successful. But I don't know if they then did their camp on their own.
I see. You know, this sounds like so wonderful. To me, it's incredible that, you know, all the infrastructure exists in terms of the work that was done to, you know, put together the curriculum so that, you know, like Rui, it could be shared with others and, you know, have a multiplying impact around the world. So if any groups were interested in trying to do this in their communities, how would they access the material that's been created?
Well, right, you would have to write directly to the Ruhi Institute and ask permission to use the material. I don't know how much of it is in English. I would have to check that, no? But yes, at least the first camp is in English. At least the first camp, it does exist in English. I don't know about the others. I would have to check that.
Okay, so the Ruhi Institute is the repository then of this.
Right, right. Yes, they have the author rights, as we say. Yes.
Yeah. Well, wonderful work.
Thank you. Yeah. No, it was a wonderful experience. It really was. It wasn't just amazing. Yeah.
So,
Winnie.
Yes, thank you so much for this inspiration. I have a couple of comments, and then I wanted to ask a question. In our own junior youth here in a small city, I want to testify to the advantage of putting kids in tents, even in a small backyard.
Yes.
Where they've never done it before and they're really afraid. And how they then go on and grow and enjoy it and lead it later.
Yes. Yes.
And then also we have a cabin that we built in the woods so that our children would understand that they didn't have to live with all the amenities of civilization. And would know that civilization was built on what people did in those circumstances anyway. And I can see in my own family how that's a basis. So you've got about almost 1,000 people, it sounds like, who went through that experience, and I guess are now in their 40s to 60s or something like that.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Pardon?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, and so I would expect that their learning there is underlying everything that they do in life, as well as in other activities of the faith. But I wanted to ask Dawn Edgerton, because we're in the agriculture working group, and we have a group that is studied soils and science and so on. And they want to make a curriculum. And Dawn, would this sort of thing be helpful to them? And if so, Kayla, is it being recorded so they could hear it?
This is being recorded. Dawn, you can turn on your mic. This presentation is going to be posted on the IEF YouTube page.
Okay.
When we're done here.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yes, there is a group. We do have a group of, I'm not sure exactly how many people, maybe a dozen or so people who are interested in creating kind of agriculture focused curriculum for junior youth and youth. And so it might be a good kind of starting point, give them some inspiration, because of your experiences. What kinds of things, what kinds of activities might, complement that study.
Right.
And that web of life game is just perfect. Yeah, because I mean, everything is a system, and you cannot separate ecology and environment from agriculture. So good. It's wonderful to hear this. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what was to us, what was really, really satisfying was the comments of the junior youth themselves. No, they always said that this was a really, really important part of their lives, and that it really changed the way they looked at their own lives and their communities and the environment. And yes, so that was the most satisfying part for us. No? Of course, you have to train the animators also, so that the animators, when they go back to their communities with their junior youth, can actually do the follow-up and the service actions in their communities. No? That's something which we needed to work on quite a lot. No? Because otherwise the camp just stays in, oh yeah, it was a nice event, it was a happy thing. We spent 4 days with some friends and we just had a fantastic time. But again, that's not the purpose. No? The purpose is for them to actually go back to their communities and start doing things, no? For the good of their community. No? And so the service actions that we identified always were fairly simple to carry out, did not require many resources, but had an impact, had a big impact. And the beautiful thing with environmental service actions is that they benefit everyone, right? They're not just for one person or one family or, or one school. They truly benefit everyone. And so there was a big emphasis on that.
Bill, did you?
Yes. Wanted to reinforce what Manolo was seeming to say, and that is that this kind of thing that you've done bears substantial fruit, and you can say that you're someone who has been involved in creating a lot of fruit. We know a lady here in Vermont, 95 years old, at a similar camp in the hills of Vermont back in the 60s and early 70s. And I got involved in this environment, Baha'i environment realm, because of Darren Headley, who was a professor at Calgary. And I just, when I see him, I think more of him as this lady's fruit, and there's so much, and that he's just one of them, so I think I'm not sure what you're trying to accomplish now, but you've already accomplished a lot. But the question I had was rather mundane, and that is, what is your budget? What do you see as a budget? Like if I decided, okay, I want to go do this, or sponsor someone who wants to go do this, what would be how much is involved? What would be a structure by which to generate funding, and how much is needed per student, or maybe for a group of students, because economies of scale issues and such as that?
In our case, the junior youth that participated are a very, very limited financial means. And so basically we had to subsidize just about everything. We asked them to contribute in species, if they could, bringing food to the camp, or to pay the transport. We always hired a bus to carry all the junior youth, so we all went there together and arrived together, right? And so at least they could cover the bus fare. But everything else, basically, we had to subsidize. The food, the implements, and so on. And so the materials, the photocopying of the materials, and so on and so forth. So that's why it makes it a little bit hard to sustain over time, because you have to have a permanent source of support, at least in the context of Colombia. I'm sure in other countries they would have the resources to pay for all the costs. But in our context, we didn't. We had to subsidize everything.
So,
but yeah,
if it's not inappropriate, how much did you have to pay?
Well, it changes, because the Colombian peso has been devalued a lot compared to the dollar, so I really wouldn't know how much it is now in dollars, but we would have to pay the bus, we would have to pay the food, we would have to pay someone to prepare the food. We would have to pay, everything else was basically volunteer, no? The maintenance of the tents and the preparing the site. These are all volunteer work, no? From the animators themselves. No? And the photocopying of the materials. So it's actually not that expensive if you have the tents, right? If you have the tents and the implements that you need, if you have that initial investment, it's not all that expensive. But I can't really give you a number. Sorry.
I've got a feel for it from what you said.
I have two questions, very
Yes.
different ones. The first one, and I just ask one, then you can respond. I'll ask the other one afterwards. The first one is, you talked that they did many environmental service projects. Now I know, I mean, many youth, one really practical service project is cleaning up trash, cleaning up a river, or, you know. There are also service projects related to agriculture, like when you grow something, but for a camp, like for a 3-day camp, you cannot really grow vegetables, you know. So that's out of the question. So but I myself have looked for practical environmental service projects for youth. What did you do in addition to cleanups?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we did the compost. That was very effective. Yes. Because again, that's something they can do within their families, right? So they have to go back and talk to their parents and convince their parents to separate the organic and the inorganic. And then what do you do with the compost? And so we had another service activity, which was a small vegetable garden. You know, just a very small vegetable garden, but obviously in the camp, you couldn't do the practice. So it was just, you know, learning like theoretically how to do it. And then when they go back to their communities, then with the animator, they would have to see how to do that, either as a group, that the group would have their vegetable garden, or within each family. Again, that depended on the initiative of the animator. Tree planting was a very successful service activity. In many of these communities, always there's sites, places where you can plant trees and take care of trees, and it really helps and it has an impact. We had salads. That was very good. No? So you have to, because we want to encourage junior youth to eat healthy food. And so we taught them how to prepare a healthy and beautiful looking, because that's part of the art project also, beautiful looking salads with all kinds of ingredients. And again, many of the junior youth in Colombia, that's a really eye-opening activity because they don't eat much salad at all. It's just not part of the diet. And so we had a lot of emphasis on that. No? Basically, those are the ones I can remember.
Thank you. That's really great. Wonderful. I looked into my files on the computer. A lifetime ago, well, it might have been 8 years ago or so, we actually approached the Ruhi Institute in Colombia and asked for these materials. I think it was Peter Adrians from the Office of External Affairs at that time, Public Affairs, and they sent us or him 3 files, which I have on my computer, but they are kind of draft files, and I think if I remember correctly, they were not supposed to be shared or posted. It was for our information. And somehow I understand they would need to be better formatted. They look more like field notes, like very well developed plans, but for internal use. So someone would have to work on them a little bit, but they are really valuable. And so it would be great if, you know, if we could post that on the IEF website, you know, like, so I don't know whether you have contact with the people who are in charge and talk about that these materials could become available so that other people could use them?
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. The materials that we have not really been published. So there's not, so all the editing work of a publisher hasn't been done. They are, we use them. That's why we use photocopies. So there's no like a booklet that has been published and printed and designed. So obviously that's a big work that needs to be done. That's a big work that needs to be done. And as I mentioned, I think so far we only have Camp 1 in English, which is the one we trained animators for in Australia and Ireland. I don't think
and
the other camps.
That's probably the files that I have. Right.
Right. The other camps I don't think exist in English yet. Okay, so. But yeah, that's obviously something that should be done. That would be really, really wonderful. But I can ask, yes, I can ask if they can be made available. At least the first camp can be made available directly.
Also, from experience, like we had situations with IEF that we needed translations. So, for example, the course Scientific and Spiritual Dimensions of Climate Change, I asked around in the IEF community, and we had friends who helped translate it into French. So the whole course, and it's kind of voluminous, 9 classes with a lot of materials. It's available in French. And then someone else volunteered to translate it into Spanish.
Okay.
So if there was a permission, to do it, it's a feasible project that could be translated. It's easier to translate than this course. Absolutely.
Right.
So yeah, all we need is the permission and the materials.
Right.
So what Christina's saying is we're happy to acquire the Spanish versions, and we will figure out the translation.
I'll have, I'll ask. It's Carmen Elisa, Carmen Elisa, who was the auxiliary board member at that time and then became the counselor. She's the one that really was behind the whole ecological camp project, we can say, right from the beginning, so yeah, she's the one that has the files, basically. So yeah, I would have to consult with her, but yeah, definitely.
And I can imagine that she's no more 20. So it is kind of important to take action soon.
Right. Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Because
definitely.
Imagine, if she passed away and all of that got lost.
Right. Yes. I'll mention that with her.
That would be great.
The IEF is very interested in having a copy. Yeah, definitely.
We're very interested. You're making our mouths water, Pascal, and then you're saying, "Oh, but you can't have it. No chocolate for you."
No. I think it would be a good idea to share it, and then you can see what you do with it. Yeah, definitely.
All right, definitely. Thanks, Pascal.
Okay, my pleasure.